The Cleveland Browns organization just got hit with something that absolutely nobody saw coming, and I'm talking about a public display of defiance that's going to shake this team to its core. What happened over the past few days represents the kind of drama that doesn't just blow over, that doesn't just get swept under the rug with some corporate statement from the PR department. This is real, this is raw, and this is about to change everything about how we view the quarterback situation in Cleveland. Shedeur Sanders just did something that backup quarterbacks simply do not do in the National Football League. He crossed a line that's understood by everyone in professional sports, but rarely spoken about out loud. He publicly sided with fans who are calling for Dillon Gabriel to be benched and for him to take over as the starting quarterback. And before anyone tries to dismiss this as some accidental social media slip-up or claim his account got hacked or whatever other excuse people want to make, let me be absolutely clear about something. This was intentional. This was calculated. This was a message sent directly to Kevin Stefanski and the entire Browns organization that cannot be ignored or explained away. The way this all went down is actually fascinating when you break it down chronologically because the timeline reveals so much about what's really happening inside that building. Let's start with what happened during the Patriots game because that's where this whole situation really started to unravel in spectacular fashion. Shedeur Sanders was mysteriously inactive for that game due to what the team called a back injury. Now, already that raises some serious questions because nobody could point to a specific moment when this injury occurred. There was no hit in practice that anyone witnessed. There was no training incident that got reported. It just suddenly appeared on the injury report late in the week, which is incredibly suspicious timing when you think about it. But here's where it gets even stranger and more questionable. Despite allegedly having this back injury that was supposedly serious enough to keep him out of an NFL game, Sanders went through his entire pre-game warm-up routine. He was out there on the field, throwing passes, moving around, doing all the stuff that healthy quarterbacks do before kickoff. And only after completing that full warm-up, only after presumably looking perfectly fine physically, was he suddenly ruled inactive right before the game started. Think about how weird that is from a normal injury management perspective. If you're genuinely concerned about a player's health, if you think there's a real risk of him making an injury worse, you don't put him through a full pregame warm-up. You make the decision earlier to protect him from unnecessary physical stress. The whole sequence of events screams that this wasn't really about injury management at all. This was about something else entirely, some other reason that the Browns organization doesn't want to publicly acknowledge. And when you combine that suspicious injury situation with what happened next, the picture becomes even clearer. Bailey Zappe, who has been absolutely terrible throughout his entire NFL career, got elevated to serve as the backup quarterback. Not Shedeur Sanders, the talented rookie who everyone outside the building thinks should be starting. Zappe, a guy who couldn't hold a job in New England when they were desperate for quarterback help. That tells you everything you need to know about how the Browns coaching staff views Sanders right now. Dillon Gabriel started that game against New England, and his performance was exactly what we've come to expect from him at this point. 21 completions on 35 attempts for 156 yards. When you do the math on that, you're looking at barely over 4 yards per attempt, which is horrifically bad for any NFL quarterback in any era, but especially in today's game where offenses are specifically designed to generate easy completions and chunk yardage. He threw 2 touchdown passes, which sounds decent in a vacuum until you realize he also threw 2 interceptions, completely canceling out whatever positive impact those touchdowns might have provided. The Browns got absolutely demolished in that game, losing by a final score that wasn't even competitive, and their record dropped to 2 wins and 6 losses, essentially ending any realistic playoff hopes before November even started. Following that embarrassing defeat, something interesting started happening across all the Browns social media spaces. Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Reddit, team message boards, everywhere you looked, fans were erupting with frustration and demanding the same thing over and over. Give Shedeur Sanders a chance. Let him play. What do we possibly have to lose at this point when the season is already effectively over? These weren't just casual fans making these demands either. These were dedicated Browns supporters who watch every snap, who understand football, who have seen enough of Dillon Gabriel to know with certainty that he's not the answer. Various fan accounts and Browns analysts started creating content around this demand, graphics calling for Sanders to start, videos breaking down why the change needs to happen, detailed statistical comparisons showing how Sanders looked better in preseason than Gabriel has looked in actual games. The drumbeat was getting louder and louder, building to a crescendo that the organization couldn't possibly ignore anymore. And that's when Shedeur Sanders made his move. That's when he did something that fundamentally changed the entire dynamic of this situation. He liked an Instagram post that explicitly called for him to replace Dillon Gabriel as the starting quarterback. Not a vague post that could be interpreted multiple ways, not some ambiguous message about working hard or staying ready, a direct, unmistakable call for him to be the starter instead of Gabriel. That single action, that one deliberate click sent shockwaves through the entire organization and the broader NFL world, because everyone who understands how professional athletes manage their social media presence, especially in politically sensitive situations like this, knows that this was absolutely not an accident. Professional athletes have entire teams helping them manage their social media. They understand the implications of every post, every like, every comment. When someone at Shedeur Sanders' level, with his profile and his situation, likes a post calling for him to replace the current starter, that's a deliberate choice with full knowledge of what message it sends. This was Sanders publicly declaring that he agrees with the criticism of the coaching staff's decision. This was him aligning himself with the fan base against the organization. This was open rebellion in the most public way possible in the modern social media age. And just to make absolutely sure that nobody could dismiss this as overreaction or fans reading too much into social media activity, former NFL quarterback Sean King weighed in with some absolutely devastating criticism of how the Browns handled their draft evaluation. King didn't pull any punches or hide behind diplomatic language. He went right at the organization with specific pointed criticism that you rarely hear from media members about front office decisions. Maybe the most egregious pick in all of the draft was the Browns picking Dillon Gabriel in the 3rd round. King stated flatly, "There's no way you can evaluate the quarterback position and have him rated as a higher prospect than Shedeur Sanders. That was a terrible draft pick." Let that statement sink in completely. A former NFL quarterback who understands the position intimately, who has no personal connection to either player, who has nothing to gain from stirring up controversy, is publicly calling the Browns' draft decision egregious. He's not saying it's debatable or that reasonable people could disagree. He's saying definitively that anyone who properly evaluated both quarterbacks would have known that Sanders was the superior prospect. And then King twisted the knife even further by adding that continuing to start Gabriel over Sanders is accelerating the mistake rather than correcting it. He's basically accusing the Browns of compounding their original error by stubbornly refusing to admit they were wrong. The timing of all this drama could not be more perfect from a football operations standpoint. The Browns are entering their bye week, which represents the ideal moment to make a quarterback change if you're ever going to do it. You have 2 weeks instead of 1 week to prepare the new starter. You have extra practice time to get him reps with the first team offense. You have time to adjust your game plan to fit his strengths rather than forcing him into a system designed for someone else. You have a natural break in the schedule where making a significant change doesn't feel as reactionary or panic to the public and media. And when the Browns come out of that bye week, they face the New York Jets, a team that's also struggling mightily and represents an absolutely winnable game if your offense can function at even a basic level of competence. Everything is aligned perfectly for Kevin Stefanski to announce that Shedeur Sanders has recovered from his mysterious back injury and will be the starting quarterback moving forward. He could use the bye week to get Sanders ready, give the fan base something to actually be excited about, inject some energy into a locker room that must be demoralized by losing, and give this lost season some actual meaning beyond just playing out the remaining schedule. But all indications suggest that Stefanski remains completely committed to Dillon Gabriel regardless of performance, regardless of results, regardless of fan sentiment, and now regardless of his backup quarterback publicly expressing disagreement with the decision. The stubbornness is reaching levels that genuinely boggle the mind at this point. What exactly does Gabriel have to do to lose this job? How bad does the performance have to get before the coaching staff admits they made a mistake? How many games do they have to lose before they're willing to to try something different? Those questions don't seem to have answers that make any logical sense. Let's talk more about that injury situation because it really does deserve intense scrutiny and investigation. According to multiple reports, Sanders' absence wasn't his decision. He didn't wake up Sunday morning feeling too hurt to play and tell the coaches he needed to sit out. The team made that decision for him, which is a crucial distinction that changes the entire context of the situation. He appeared on the injury report late in the week with a back concern that he allegedly self-reported, but then he went through a complete pre-game warm-up looking totally fine physically before getting pulled at the last minute. After the game, when Sanders finally got a chance to address the media, his comments were extremely revealing about what actually transpired. He made it crystal clear that the choice to sit was made by the organization, not by him. He didn't ask to be held out. He didn't tell anyone he was too injured to play. They decided for him. And then he said something that should terrify Kevin Stefanski. "I guarantee I'm going to be good," Sanders told reporters when asked about potentially missing additional time. That's not the statement of someone who's genuinely hurt and uncertain about recovery. That's the statement of someone who knows he's perfectly healthy and is frustrated about being kept off the field for reasons that have nothing to do with actual injury. The whole situation reeks of organizational hesitation about giving Sanders any opportunity under any circumstances. Think about the context of that Patriots game specifically. It became a blowout early. The Browns were getting destroyed. Those are exactly the circumstances where backup quarterbacks typically get playing time, even if they're not the official starter. Garbage time reps are valuable for young players. They get to experience real game speed, real NFL defenses, real pressure without the outcome of the game hanging in the balance. But mysteriously, right before that game, where Sanders could have gotten valuable experience even in a losing effort, he developed a back injury that nobody witnessed happening and that he himself seems to think wasn't serious enough to keep him out. Questions absolutely need to be asked about whether this was purely medical decision-making or whether it was part of a broader pattern of the organization finding reasons not to play Sanders under any circumstances. The timing was too convenient, the injury was too vague, the recovery timeline was too uncertain, and Sanders' own comments suggested he didn't understand why he was being held out. This has fueled massive speculation about internal disagreements regarding what the actual plans are for Sanders' future with the team. Are there coaches who want to play him but are being overruled by Stefanski? Is the front office pushing for Sanders to get opportunities while the coaching staff resists? Are scouts and personnel evaluators seeing something different in practice than what Stefanski claims to see? Meanwhile, Dillon Gabriel's performance continues to be absolutely dreadful by any objective measure. Through his starts this season, he's thrown for just barely over 700 yards total. That works out to an average of about 175 yards per game, which is pathetically low in the modern pass-happy NFL, where most starting quarterbacks are expected to throw for at least 250 yards per game just to be considered adequate. He has 5 touchdown passes against 2 interceptions, which sounds somewhat respectable until you realize that ratio is being maintained primarily because he's so terrified of making mistakes that he refuses to push the ball downfield or take any chances whatsoever. But the statistic that really tells the complete story about how bad Gabriel has been is his quarterback rating. Not the old passer rating that's easily manipulated, but QBR, which is the most comprehensive evaluation metric that accounts for every aspect of quarterback play. Gabriel's QBR is sitting at an abysmal 25.8. That ranks him 32nd in the entire league, dead last. Worst quarterback in football according to the most sophisticated metric we have for evaluating the position. And yet, Kevin Stefanski continues acting like Gabriel just needs more time, more reps, more experience, and eventually things will click. When reporters ask Stefanski about the struggles and the growing calls for change, he deploys the same deflection strategy every single time. Playing good offense is about 11 guys on the field and us as coaches doing our job, Stefanski said in what has become his scripted response. Obviously, young players will learn in each outing. Dillon will continue to learn and get better, but it's really an entire offensive thing where we all need to be better. That's corporate coach speak at its absolute finest. Lots of words that sound reasonable and professional on the surface, but communicate absolutely nothing of substance and don't address any of the actual questions being asked. Yes, offense requires all 11 players executing their assignments. Yes, coaches need to do their jobs properly. Yes, young players learn from experience and improve over time. But none of that meaningless platitude addresses the fundamental question everyone wants answered. Is Dillon Gabriel good enough to be an NFL starting quarterback? And if the honest answer is no, or even if the answer is we're not sure yet, then why are you continuing to play him over someone who might be significantly better? The reality that Stefanski refuses to acknowledge publicly is that quarterback is exponentially more important than any other position on offense. You can have 10 great players and one terrible quarterback, and your offense will struggle mightily, but you can have 10 average players and one great quarterback, and your offense can be excellent. As Cleveland heads into its bye week with extra time to evaluate, prepare, and potentially make changes, the divide between what fans want and what the coaching staff is doing has become impossible to ignore or bridge. It's not just fans anymore demanding this change. It's former players like Sean King who understand the position. It's media members who cover the team daily and see things up close. It's reportedly people inside the building who are frustrated with the direction. And now, most dramatically and publicly, it's Shedeur Sanders himself aligning with those calling for him to play. The message from the player and his supporters is becoming too loud for the organization to continue ignoring without serious consequences. Whether Sanders' Instagram activity and his public confidence about being ready actually translates into a quarterback change remains completely uncertain. Kevin Stefanski has proven remarkably stubborn about admitting mistakes or changing course even when overwhelming evidence suggests he should. He's dug in on Dillon Gabriel as his guy, and at this point it seems like pride and ego are preventing him from making the obvious move that needs to happen. But the pressure is building to unsustainable levels. You can only hold back the flood for so long before the dam breaks catastrophically. Something has to give here, and it has to give soon. The question now becomes what happens next in this absolute circus of dysfunction? Does Kevin Stefanski finally swallow his pride and give Shedeur Sanders the opportunity that he's clearly earned and that the fan base desperately wants to see? Does ownership step in and force the issue, making it clear that Sanders needs to play regardless of what the head coach personally wants? Does this situation continue festering and deteriorating until it explodes in some even more dramatic and public fashion that does permanent damage to everyone involved? Or does Stefanski double down on his stubbornness, maybe even punish Sanders somehow for the public display of disagreement, and make this entire disaster even worse than it already is? One thing is absolutely certain beyond any doubt. Shedeur Sanders just drew a line in the sand that cannot be erased. He made his position clear for everyone in the organization and everyone watching from outside to see. He's ready to play right now. He believes he should be playing. He's aligned himself publicly with those demanding change. And he's done waiting quietly on the sideline while his career and his opportunity get buried by organizational dysfunction and coaching stubbornness. The rebellion has officially begun, the message has been sent, and now Kevin Stefanski has to decide how he's going to respond to this unprecedented act of public defiance from his backup quarterback. Does he give Sanders his shot and potentially salvage something from this disaster of a season? Does he punish Sanders for speaking out and make the situation even more toxic? Does he continue pretending like nothing has changed while the entire organization burns around him? The Browns are in full crisis mode right now, whether they want to publicly admit it or not. The quarterback situation is a mess. The locker room has to be fracturing. The fan base is in open revolt. And now the backup quarterback has publicly declared that he should be starting instead of the guy currently getting the job. This is organizational dysfunction at its absolute peak. And something has to give before it destroys whatever's left of this season and potentially does long-term damage to the franchise that takes years to repair. The clock is ticking, the pressure is mounting, and Kevin Stefanski's next move will define his legacy in Cleveland one way or another.